It's time to enhance the relationship between expertise and impact, between knowledge and application. Welcome to a journey of discovery and empowerment. Welcome to All Physicians Lead, the Forbes Books podcast that highlights the critical leadership role that all practicing physicians take on every day. Here's Dr. Leon Morse.
So we're excited to have as our guest today, Dr. Gerald Harmon, a family physician, retired Major General in the U.S. Air Force, the past president of the American Medical Association, and currently serving as the Interim Dean at the University of South Carolina School of Medicine in Columbia. Dr. Harmon, sir, Dean, General, Professor, welcome to All Physicians Lead. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, General. I'm very, very happy with you. Our Dr. Leon, I don't want to, I'll give you a field promotion, Leon.
Well, I appreciate that. What a great leadership experience, medical experience, life experience you've had. We like to start off these conversations with you just sort of recapping, if you went back and gave us a synopsis of your life, why medicine, why Air Force, why all of these leadership roles? How'd that all play out?
It played out as though the Lord had a plan. I'm openly spiritual. I will tell anybody that,
Sure.
but my spirituality is personal. I don't consider myself an apostle, but I'm trying to convert others to any type of religious thought. But I feel like there is a plan, and I'm part of it. I try to take opportunities where they present themselves. What's interesting about myself, and I think many leaders, is some don't actively choose to lead, but they take leadership when they find themselves in a role that requires decision making. It requires leadership. It requires action. So those things are kind of what I think has driven my leadership path, as it were.
So you always wanted to be a doctor? How did you decide that was part of your future? I understand, um, first college graduate in your family, if I have that right. How did you say, "Oh gosh, I'm gonna be a doctor"?
Well, actually, it was interesting. My father was actually a college graduate, but my family grew up in rural South Carolina. They migrated, emigrated, as it were, to South Carolina in the middle of the 18th century, 1750s. Came over from the southwestern Germany area. Came over in a boat. Ancestor came over with his wife and 3 children. Landed in the central part of South Carolina after coming ashore in Charlestown Landing in South Carolina, and we're all farmers. They have always been kind of dirt farmers, as it were. My grandfather was in textile mills and cotton mills in a small town called Newberry, South Carolina.
Hmm.
Cotton mills in South Carolina and the Southeast typically had their workers stay on the campuses. They were called mill villages, and the various mill villages is where my family grew up. My grandfather worked in the same job in a cotton mill for 56 years.
Wow.
Never went to college or anything. His elder son, my father, did go to college, got a degree in textile engineering,
Uh-huh.
supposedly, but he also,
Family business.
yeah, that's right, kind of the family business. And he was in ROTC in college, so he was a Korean War era vet. He graduated just at the end of the Korean War conflict, and then he went to Europe for deployment for a couple of years,
Hmm.
and was in an army base in Europe. Came back, had myself, a brother and a sister, and a young spouse to take care of in the cotton mill industry, and then was stricken with cancer and died when I was a teenager.
I'm sorry.
Left a single parent mom with 3 youngsters, and we were pretty vigorous. We were very active. Did a really good job. Worked to keep us all fed and clothed. Moved into the old family uh, home in small town America. I wound up going to school. I was gifted. I had inherited my dad's intellect, I guess, or at least some semblance thereof, and made good grades. Wound up going to University of South Carolina and majoring in physics and mathematics. Thought I wanted to be an astrophysicist. Was excited about that.
Ah,
Uh, had a bit of a scholarship there, and went to college there with my high school sweetheart. So we were both excited. I found out that as I got close to graduation that I didn't really have a good job opportunity in astrophysics in my early 70s. And so I was kind of thinking what I was going to do when I graduated from college. My wife said, "Why don't you go into medicine?" And I said,
wow, smart lady.
she was a nursing student. And I said, I don't want to be a nurse. And she said, "No, you don't even have to study. You just show up for class and take these grades, and you're bright. I think you can get into medical school." And I said, "I never thought about it. Duh." And I said, "I couldn't afford medical school." But my dad had been in the military, and I respected him. He was in the National Guard and in the Army, had been a captain in the Army. And I thought, well, let me go down to the military recruiters and see what they offer. So you went down to the recruiting office those days. You didn't go online. There was no online.
Mm-hmm.
The library and check out books and things. And I found out about this stuff called medical school. And I went to the recruiter and said, "Hey, I might like to join the military." And they said, "Well, we don't really need astrophysicists, but you think you can get into healthcare?" I said, "Well, you're the second person who told me that." So I went and looked it up, found out that they had this thing called a scholarship, national uh, helps. I think it was the Armed Forces Health Profession Scholarship, and they would pay for medical school if I could get in. So I wrote letters of application, et cetera, to get into medical school, and talking if I didn't get accepted. Who
There's
knew?
plan, like you
That's the
said.
plan.
There's
That
plan.
So I wound up and decided to go into the Air Force, and was an Air Force reservist then when I was in medical school. And then I went to, after I graduated from medical school, I took an Air Force residency and decided I liked all of medicine. I liked family medicine. I liked surgery. I liked everything. But family medicine attracted me the most. And I wound up doing family medicine in the Air Force. Before I had known it, I had a 35-year military career in my rearview mirror. And you talk about leadership, talk about the opportunities. The military taught me all of those things. Yes, it
Yeah.
did. Sure, you understood that too from your career.
Yeah, like, you said before you knew it, 35 years was in the rearview mirror. It's that country song, "Don't Blink," right? Because it goes by very, very quickly, doesn't it?
And Leon, what you'll find, and what many people will find, it the doors will open upon them. The opportunities. When I was finished my residency in family medicine at Eglin Air Force Base, which is a very attractive, busy residency. It was the only residency there. And in medicine, if you're in an unopposed residency program in your postgraduate training, you get one-on-one training by board certified experts, by particular leaders in every discipline, whether it's surgery, ophthalmology, orthopedics, OBGYN, excuse me, you name it. You get hands-on training at the foot of the master, so to speak. And they get you really well qualified. So by the time I'd finished my 3-year family medicine residency, I was delivering babies. I was doing operative deliveries. I was doing closed bone reductions in orthopedic clinic
Mhm.
and appendectomies. I was prepared to be a doctor of all sorts whenever I was deployed within the military system. And it was excellent training. You yourself can testify on how good the military training. They really prepare you for the unexpected.
They do because you never know where you're gonna be. Our school up here at the Uniformed Services University's motto, unofficial motto, is "Good medicine in bad places." And so, you end up in some of those places, you can't just call the rep and get a piece of equipment brought in from across town sometimes. You need to figure out what the patient needs and apply it,
Yes,
in
sir.
those circumstances, so it's great. You mentioned Eglin. We
Uh-huh.
didn't quite overlap, but I do have, I won't say fond memories, that's the last phase of ranger school, is right in those that area. So we were pretty close back years and years and years ago.
Leon, I'll tell you, as a resident physician and intern there at the Edlin Reservation, I'm very familiar with the Ranger School because the Rangers would go out there and get those tabs on that Edlin Reservation, very large reservation.
That's right.
And one of my very memorable experiences was I had to I was on call a lot of the weekends, since they had never had family medicine residents or any kind of interns at Egmont. They took advantage of us, I would suggest, and they put us into various areas. And we would be deployed out to the Ranger Italian aid station, so to speak, there, and wind up taking care of them. In fact, my first publication in the Journal of the AMA was a case report about 13 Rangers who had done blood brother rituals out there in the Ranger where they had, cut their palms or their hand with a knife and blood brother. Well, and one of them had hepatitis A when they did that.
Oh, oh, geez.
So
Kids today, you never get them out to anything.
I had 13 jaundice Rangers all sick at the same time. So I reported on that in JAMA, and it was another ritual. But that they would do anything.
Don't put anything past a Ranger. That's right. Yeah, we joke, what the N in Ranger stands for, right? And the answer is knowledge. So I think your case report just proved it once again. So, talking about leadership, you've experienced a ton of this. You've led at so many levels. For physicians specifically, if you had to give some advice of the most important leadership qualities, characteristics to our listeners, from your lens, what do physicians need to concentrate on to be the best leaders they can be?
Leon, I like to tell in a quick summary when I give leadership talks to folks, whether they're resident physicians, whether they're graduating or entering medical students, or mid-career physicians. I tend to focus on what I call 4 C's, okay? And that is competence, being able, being trained, being prepared, having learned your skill, being competent. And so you have the skill set when it's necessary to apply it. Then you have to have the confidence to know when it's necessary, the judgment, so to speak, when that application of that competence that you possess, that skill that you have, whether it's to deliver a baby, whether it's to do an appendectomy, whether it's to do a chest tube, to do CPR, to do whatever is necessary to choose a therapeutic path forward or preventive path. You have to have that confidence to know that you are competent. Then you have to deliver it in a compassionate manner. What would you want done if it was your family, or if it were you receiving that competent manner? So you had to be able to do those 3 C's, which is competence, confidence, and compassion. And then those 3 C's applied and possessed and maintained in an appropriate skill set develop what I call the big C, which is character. You've got that character. That's the character of a competent physician leader. They know what they need to do. They know how to do it, and they know when to do it. And they need to do it in a compassionate manner. So that's if you do that, you're going to be a good doc, no matter the skill, no matter the opportunity. And a lot of my colleagues will come back a couple of years later and say, "Hey, I remember your C's, Dr. Harmon or Dean
There you
Harmon."
go.
And they really do. So, if you keep that in in your hip pocket, I like that. One of the other leadership tracks I've always thought to recommend to people is throughout my career, and to your point, when I've decided to stay in the military, and after I did my active duty commitment from my health profession scholarship, I stayed in the Air National Guard to maintain military ties, but also liked having an anchor. I like being aware of my family, and too, and all of our military colleagues, and even physician and healthcare colleagues know that in order to be a real leader, you have to have a very enabling, supporting, team-based family. But this leadership journey is always a team-based journey. It's never done in a vacuum. It's always done with neighbors, with supporters, with colleagues. So what I also have learned to tell people when they ask, General Harmon, Leon, Jerry, when they ask us what I want to be a leader like you. What's the secret to being a successful captain or colonel or general or dean? Well, it's to be really good at your current work assignment. The
Mhm.
way to get promoted, the way to get recognized, the way to advance is do your current skill, whatever it is, your current mission, extremely well. Do it with diligence, not with the intent of being promoted to the next rank, but being successful in your current assignment. So leadership tends to develop. I'm not sure the leaders are born. I think they're developed and they realize uh, and get knowledge, not so much wisdom, but they get knowledge just when their experience and their response to their experiences. So that's another key uh, factor in becoming a leader.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's that whole philosophy that, the past is behind you, the future is unpredictable, but today is the only thing you can really control. Today is reality, and today is, as you said, the job you're in, the work you're doing, the patient in front of you. That's where if you put, 100% of your effort and do all those things with the C's that you just talked about, you're going to be successful, and people are going to recognize that. That's nice.
Well, yeah, that's right. And I mean that you, the difference that you have made in your career is that you've taken these leadership experiences and these leadership uh, clues, and you put them down in writing. You put them in a book. You've made them memorialized, and that's something that sometimes leaders, and I appreciate being called a leader, and I'm proud of being a leader, but we get so busy leading and doing that we don't take enough time and discipline to do what you have done in your career and others like yourself is memorialize this, put it in a volume, put it in a book, keep a diary or a log, write it down so that when the time comes to share those experiences and to make sure others learn from them also, you've got them written down. You've got to memorialize, and then you broadcast them as you're doing with this podcast, so that those that are really thirsty for this and uh, who may only just be casually listening say, "Hey, that's a good idea that Leo Harmon guy came up with." The best way to get a better job is to do your present job really well and to be in the moment with, and especially in medical care and health care and in the military too, which is to me are two of the finest professions we can be in, and I'm very blessed to have been in both. You're in the moment, but your focus needs to be on your patient in your presence right there. Try not to be distracted. Try not to carry uh, your personal stuff into the exam room or into the cockpit or into the foxhole with you. All those things. You and I know that you carry all this stuff that's in your head because you're bright enough and self-aware enough that you got a lot going on. But when you're in that operating room, you're in that exam room, you're in that cockpit, you're in that uh, driver's seat of that armored vehicle. You're focused on the mission at hand, which is that patient or that military mission. And that takes focus, that takes compartmentalization, and that is a learned skill there.
No, that's so true. And you can put that corollary out to the best athletes in the world and they will tell you, you can't be thinking about the next game or whether you're going to make the playoffs. You can't even be thinking about your next shot in golf or basketball. It's this shot right here. And you don't think about the last one that you put in the water, right? You, the only one that matters if you really want to do well is the one right now. So great thought there. Back to those 4 C's, it's interesting because and thank you for mentioning the book and the all physicians lead concept is that it's not just doctors with a title who are influencing behavior to achieve a desired result, but it's every doctor every day with every patient, with every team member, with your community, with your family. You're constantly having influence and impact. And if you do it upholding those 4 C's that you talked about, those apply to every doctor, not just chiefs and chairmen and deans and flag officers, right? I mean, this is something that every doctor every day should be doing, and I think you said that very well.
Well, and Leon, you're right. I'm going to give a talk later today to my graduating fourth year medical students. It's called a capstone lecture.
Nice.
So we do that, and it's going to kind of be one of those. We're graduating these 96 students. I had a class of 100, but 4 of them have taken years of research, a year off of research or something like that. But these 96 MDs are going to, I'm going to release them into the wild. But
That's
I'm
right.
going to give them a capstone lecture, and I'm going to tell them, I'm going to remind them what I would have reminded them if I'd been here 4 years ago. I'm only in my second year here, but what I tell the entering class and what you have told many students, what you published about, is that you're leaders now. You were leaders when you started. I told you 4 years ago. I told you 2 years ago. I tell everybody in this room is a leader because they're going to be wearing that white coat. They're going to have the respect of their colleagues. They're going to have the ears of their colleagues listening to them. And everything they say, everything they do will be looked at as a role model. And even though they may not want to be, they're going to be perceived as leaders. So they need to wear those trappings, need to assume that role. Remember that mic's always hot, the cameras are always rolling. Somebody is
Yeah.
watching, and you're a mentor for someone, even though you never thought of that before. And that's right, this leadership role. And if you put it into you make it part of your daily ritual. I know it's discouraging, but you got to start every day focus because people's lives, their futures will depend on the decisions you make. I don't want you to go carry that burden of, oh my goodness, I'm not, that's too much. That's burning me out. Just realize it's there, make it part of your ritual and assume it just as any other part of your daily ritual. And it becomes a part of you, part of that character we talk about.
That's right. And, I try to emphasize it's not that you're the boss or that you're all that. And I think some people sort of recoil from the idea that, well, I'm not special. And that's not the point. The point is that you have influence, you have impact. That's undeniable.
Yeah.
The question is not whether you have influence and impact, but whether you recognize it and whether you want to try to improve upon those qualities that exist. You can't deny they exist, right?
And you embrace it. And if you embrace it, next thing you know, it's kind of fun. And
Yeah.
and you get this internal reward that I made a difference today. And then you don't save everybody. There are diseases that don't have good outcomes, but you gave it your best. You were there when that family or that patient needed you. You were empathetic. You had that sea of compassion while you had the confidence and the confidence to be part of their healthcare team. But you realize that you are, to your point, human, and you are learning, and you'll learn from even the bad, the bad times. They'll teach you uh, maybe some opportunities, some experiences to handle those difficult times. Now, there's never, to your point, there's never an easy way to do a difficult thing and have a satisfying, happy outcome. But you gave it your best. You were there when the patient needed you. You were there when the situation required your skills. You applied it, and you'll be stronger for the next opportunity. You'll be experienced, and there'll be some learning there. And you're always in the learning professions as well as in our leadership profession.
Yeah, it's interesting that you point that out, and I'll, share with the listeners that I'm proud of the fact that some of the most heartfelt letters that I've ever received were from families of patients that we've lost, because we were able to give them hope and provide comfort in what is, the most difficult time in a parent's life, the loss of a child. And you think about that, and you hate to quote lose, but there are things that you can do to help this family and this child through this time that obviously they consider quite valuable.
Leon, you remind me, um, one of the things I do tell young doctors, and I don't always think about it, is I keep a memento drawer, as it were. I've
Same
got
here.
numbers, I've got gifts, I've got these handwritten notes. Uh, Dear Dr. Harmon, thank you for being there. Uh, I have a video, an audio recording that was left on my phone about 10 years ago. It was from a gentleman. He said, Dr. Harmon, it was just a voicemail left on me. He said, Dr. Harmon, this is Homer. And it's mentioned his last name. And I said, I know that. He said, I just want to tell you, I thank you for being there with my wife. And she had you were the hospice house director. She had a tough time there at the end, but you were there, took care of her. You were very professional. And I was comforted by the fact that you were there. You need to know that. Not everybody will tell you that. But this is a mid 70-year-old farmer from rural South Carolina. All this stuff about this new thing with internet and cell phones and all was new to him, but he just knew that I took care of his wife of 60 years, and he was gracious and graceful enough to leave me a voicemail. And I kept
Yeah.
those kind
Means a lot. Means a lot, doesn't it?
And I'm going to tell you one other thing I actually have in my office here. The first gift I received as a patient when I was from a patient. When I was an intern at Eglin Air Force Base in late 70s. Eglin was also a low security federal prison. It might still be that, as far as I know. And so, the various low threat, nonviolent criminals would spend years and incarcerated at Eglin, but they would wear ankle bracelets or something and have the run of the reservation. But we did health care. The new interns and residents in that family medicine department was assigned to take care of the prisoners.
Oh, yeah.
So I took care of this one fellow who came in to see me in the equivalent of a prisoner sick call, so to speak, in the family medicine clinic there at Adam. And he came in and he was, I guess the best way to describe it, he was a mafia don, is what I would suggest. At least that's what he came in. Just like The Godfather, which had just come out a couple of years before that.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Holy cow.
They said, and he had the New York accent. Yes, he said, "You the new doc here, and I appreciate it." And I said, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Mr. Singh." So I have this indigestion, and it's bad, and I take Malox, and it's still indigestion. And I say to him, I think you've got a heart condition. What you're thinking is indigestion. You have a bad heart. So we're gonna get a heart evaluation for you. So we did it, and he had 3-vessel bypass.
Oh,
His
my goodness.
question was angina.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so he came back to me, we got him operated on. We didn't do heart surgery there at Edmond. We sent him over to Pensacola where he had the heart surgery there, came back. And then he came back in a couple of months later, and he brought this door hanger of macrame. Okay. And
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
okay.
Familiar.
Yeah, it's interesting. He made this for me. Since you got a video, I'll show you. It's just
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
he handmade it in his prison workshop,
Wow.
and it's just a door hanger. But he gave that to me in 1977, and that was the first gift. And he said, "I want you to have this. I don't get to do anything, but I make this for you." He said, "I know it's not much, but you're part of my family now, and because of you, I am here."
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
And he brought tears to my eyes, this little fellow. So I just saved it. See these young students, and our medical school not only has medical students, it's got nurse anesthetist students, it's got physician assistants, I've got rehab counselors, I've got almost as many non-physician students as I have physician students at school. And all of these healthcare providers, they sometimes come in wondering if they made the right choice. They had brought in. I said, "Listen, you're not doing it just for you. You're doing it for a patient population, and just think how much difference you can make it." And I said, what I did, and I keep letters and things like this, and I keep them, and I've got this. It's just like a little souvenir drawer you keep. It better remind you why you're doing what you're doing, the impact you have, and how much people really, really appreciate you, and you just have to put that in your I guess it's in your positive file for the dark and weary days when you'll experience some little emotionally yourself, and they help you. It's non-medical, but it is therapeutic, and I tell people about that.
Yeah, it's so true. And you can imagine that for every person who actually takes the time to reach out with a letter or a gift,
Mhm.
that there are dozens or maybe hundreds that feel very positively about their interactions with you as a physician, and it's there, but they might not necessarily make that direct connection. So, multiply the memory drawer by some factor, and that's the reality of that situation. So, yeah, it's one of the things that keeps me from retiring. I know that. So,
Leon, it does, and it's an extended runway I find myself in. I I would have considered myself retired when I left the military in 2007 at a 35-year career. And then next thing you know, I was in a 10 or 15-year AMA leadership path for the American Medical Association.
notice that.
And I did not intend to wind up as chairman and president. I intended to learn more about organized medicine. To me, it
Yeah.
was a lot like the military. It had some structure. It had mission statements. It had organizational uh, opportunities. It had battlefields, the battlefield of a American healthcare delivery system, which
Mhm.
was still under some distress, no question of it. But it felt like it gave me a compounded voice versus a single person uh, trying to rail against the enemy. So I chose that opportunity to be involved in organized medicine. I thought the AMA represented healthcare very well with um, patients as its focus and its mission being uh, advancing the art and science of medicine and the betterment of public health. I mean, that's mom and apple pie.
Hard to argue.
Hard to argue with that. So wound up again not to become a trustee or officer, just to be a council member, just to be have my perspective as recovering military, family medicine, and rural South Carolina background because I thought they were a little bit underrepresented those particular venues. Uh, but that gave me another opportunity to retire. And then when I left the AMA a couple of years ago, I was offered the chance to be in healthcare education and leadership in a medical school that's rapidly growing in a state that's rapidly growing. So I find myself uh, building a new medical school campus here. We have a 47-year-old medical school, but we're tenants on the VA healthcare campus, like many medical schools in America. They are co-located with a VA healthcare center. So we're actually building our own new campus, 308,000 square foot health sciences center with the medical school as the center. So you get called to do these things. You get a chance to lead, and then you get a chance to recruit and retain more healthcare workers onto your team to
That's
bring
right.
the workforce. And again, to handle this rapidly growing area in the South that is seeing an influx of patients and industry, just the challenges of growth. And as they come into the area, they bring in more and more of a disease burden, public health needs. We got to expand that. And I find family medicine to be the perfect discipline um, to apply that skill set. It's really exciting. And then we get to recognize, to your point, all of us, as we go into the healthcare profession, get a chance to answer the public's needs
Mhm.
at the local level as well as the federal level. It's a fun opportunity, and I guess at some point I'll retire. I'm still practicing medicine. I've received over the last couple of months my VA healthcare provider, so I'm trained now in VA medicine. I'm not an expert in the healthcare record, but I can point and click into VA healthcare.
I don't think any of us are experts in the electronic records.
So I still appreciate medical students and residents. I still have an occupational medicine uh, clinic, as it were, and now I'm a VA healthcare provider too. So, like a lot of doctors, I have a hard time giving up. The family medicine discipline perhaps is a little more uh, conducive to extending runway. As a surgeon, you can understand that motor skills are really highly in demand
Mhm.
for various disciplines that are operators, that are interventionalists, that have to worry about uh, eyes, ears, hearing, motor skills. Uh, Family medicine, some of our less interventional skills. I think we can stay in the game and be competent and still be a contributing member, especially in educational opportunities and research. And I encourage all physicians to think about extending that runway and not artificially imposing um, a retirement date.
Yeah. 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 I mean, that experience and judgment, certainly there's new information coming in such volumes that I don't think any of us can keep up completely, but the the judgment is irreplaceable, and being able to give glimpses of that judgment and experience to residents, medical students, junior faculty is priceless. So commend you on that continuation. And when I listen to you string those experiences together, the one word that just unites all of them for me is service. Really service to others, others before self. Um, Certainly, when we go into medicine, we don't typically have to worry about putting food on the table, but we don't do it for the financial reward. I don't think you could sustain it if that was your primary goal, but rather to serve others, and that's what allows you to get called in the middle of the night and go in or work extra hours on the days and weekends because it makes you feel like you're providing that service. So thanks for continuing to do that in so many realms.
Well, Jan, thank you. That service though, and I do agree. And I was just at a double AMC meeting, Associated American Medical Colleges. Had a spring meeting, and the discussion about service did occur. There was a young two resident physicians, residents and fellows, who talked about the perspective of the resident fellow community as they entered their professional careers, and they're not interns, they're senior fellows or chief residents, and they're concerned about their work-life balance. And I understand that. Your generation, my generation, we probably sacrificed too much of our work-life balance. We
Mhm.
really did. But we were enabled by our families. My spouse of 53 years has been my enabler in chief. She's the one who told me to go into healthcare,
Yeah.
suggested that, but she's my enabler in chief. She's a career nurse. She worked as a nurse educator, an office nurse, a hospital nurse, nurse administrator, a hospice nurse, and the last 15 years was a school nurse. So she's been throughout the spectrum of nursing,
Wow. Yeah, that's a broad experience for sure.
broad experience, but she also probably, one of our major contributions to healthcare was enabling me to have a leadership role in medicine that helped educate a lot of others and helped have an impact on healthcare beyond the reach of my one stethoscope. I guess I tell people that I can only touch so many people at a time with a stethoscope, but if I get an opportunity to be president of the AMA, dean of a medical school, uh, deputy surgeon general for the Air Force, then I can impact the lives of hundreds of millions of Americans. And so that leadership opportunity was enabled by uh, a very supportive family. And we don't want to forget that. So when I talk to these young residents and physicians in training about work-life balance, they want to have all this impact too. They too need to figure out how to balance and compartmentalize and carry their families with them in this leadership role and recognize that they're going to have some time. And we as colleagues, we need to tell them, hey, you got to take a day off. You got to rest a little bit. but not in the middle of a case, not in the middle of an emergency or something like that.
Right.
Best you can with this work-life balance. Be able to compartmentalize, just as we talk about compartmentalizing bad results and compartmentalizing and putting somewhere in your cortex the bad times and then uh, buoy it with the good times and the memory drawer and the letters and all the souvenirs you carry. You have to find out some way to internally balance that work life commitment so that you don't take your work home with you. You don't uh, take it out on your family, your neighbors.
Mhm.
That's a learned skill. That's not something you always want. So I try to also demonstrate that, and I know you do too. And you talk about it in your writings. This leadership journey is not a solitary journey. It's one where you have colleagues, you have family, you're supporting help, friends. That's something you have to work at. It does take some. You have to schedule some time. You really do. And that's what led, of course, to the work hour limitation of 80-hour work week. Because I know I'd work 120 hours. I mean, I'd be on call every night. You have to actually. Sometimes you have to take the keys from them. You're not safe to drive. You have to take the stethoscope. You're not
That's
safe.
right.
Have this stethoscope. Hold that scalpel. Let me take it from you a little bit. Get your stuff in gear. Your colleagues are probably your best therapeutic agent in there. Not to judge you adversely, but to support you sometimes when you don't know you need that support.
Yep.
Skill too.
Yeah, that's the old joke that we used to have. How do you hide a $100 bill from a neurosurgeon? You tape it to their kid's forehead, um, because they never get to see him. But all humor has a little kernel of truth to it, right? And
It
that's
does. It
yeah,
does. And that, whereas, uh, the highly focused leadership does require humanism in its core. And that's a difficult balance. You and uh, I remembered the folks when I was growing up in the old days, in the early 70s and early 80s, when you were the resident physician, you'd get whacked with an instrument across your hand or something. Don't do that,
yep,
And I would see instruments thrown across in an operating room. You would too, I'm sure. You've got to control those emotions, and you don't have to throttle your uh, uh, enthusiasm. You don't have
right,
to throttle your skill, but you just need to balance it. And it takes colleagues to help us. Very few can do that with the inborn skill. That's something that has to be trained, and that's why some of the higher intensity residencies, like uh, some interventional specialties, such as pediatric neurosurgery, the highly skill dependent training skills, require 7 or 8 years, not
mhm,
just 3 years. It takes time to cultivate and then to not perfect, but improve to the point where you feel you've got that skill set, but then you take that skill and you apply it to the benefit of your patients and the profession. It's what we that's what the maturation of postgraduate medical education is for. You know,
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah. Takes a while, and then honestly, I was probably 10 years out from my pediatric neurosurgery fellowship before I got to the point where I felt okay. Now I'm really competent. You can continue to improve, certainly, but
Mhm.
you do reach a point, but it's not the day you get your diploma by any means for any of us, right? I'm sure, in all specialties like that. You know, you talked about we've been talking about balance here a little bit, and one of the questions that I always like to throw out there for folks who've done, uh, ridden these 2 horses or 3 horses of practicing medicine, serving in senior leadership roles is how do you balance those responsibilities? I think back to one of the times where I was a deputy commander, and some of the feedback I would get from the directors in the organization would frequently say, you know, name one thing Dr. Morse should stop doing? What things should he keep doing? What things should he stop doing? And one of the things that came up frequently in that role is should stop doing neurosurgery. And I, personally sort of railed against that because I thought, if I'm not down in the trenches with the EMR, struggling with the hospital logistics and seeing patients, then I lose a little bit of credibility as a senior leader. But furthermore, I didn't want to give up my clinical practice to be, uh, a senior vice president or a commander. So I commend you for continuing your clinical work. But what do you say to folks that say you got to pick? It's either be a doctor or be an executive.
I got to tell you, I am biased in that I do think, and I think you can see this too. I've seen it in every discipline I have been in, whether it was um, in a hospital in general. If you once you stop seeing patients, you lose a modicum of credibility with the other clinicians.
Mhm.
Not only with the doctors, but with the pharmacists, with the lab techs, with the nurses. And I know you have decades of experience, but unless you're still in the front lines, unless you're still dealing with that electronic record, with the prior authorizations, with the pharmacy callbacks, with the lack of band-aids in the room or whatever.
Yep.
Once you're not in the operating room, you don't know where the scrub nurses are or the you know, the rotating nurses are, the circulators. Once you're not in the arena, you lose them. People tend to tone you out. It's
Yeah,
just human nature.
for
When
sure.
you're a retired football player and you become an announcer, they know you can analyze, but they know you're not being chased around and dodging tacklers, jumping on fumbles. The same thing in the military structure itself. Once you quitted flying in the cockpit, once you stepped out of the cockpit, you're a former aviator versus a current one. You're no longer uh, fully understand the risk because you're not in the air anymore. You see that, and it's just normal. And when you hang up your stethoscope or your reflex hammer or your scalpel, then they still look upon you for more difficult judgments, but they still do not looked upon as being a frontline operator. And so I think it's important that we maintain in leadership, and I see it in my current situation. The current medical leaders that I work with within our clinical partner still maintain their clinical privileges.
Yeah.
There's an OBGYN, there's a neurologist. Uh, uh, Now, it is a little tougher, and I'll admit that some of the disciplines require a little more acuity, such as neurosurgery. The reality is it takes a little different acuity to fly a fifth generation fighter than it might to fly a tanker. And I'm not
Mhm.
disparage my tanker transport bomber crews versus my fighter attack recce crews. But the reality is a different mindset, different neurosurgical mindset, clinical. But as long as you're still seeing patients, then I think you have standing credibility in the ear of your audience.
Yeah, and you mentioned ear, and I was thinking about the idea that w- people see you differently and communicate with you differently. So I'm fond of saying that as a leader, you have to remember that God gave you two ears and one mouth for a reason. You should do twice as much listening as you do talking, at least. And people talk very differently around me and to me when I'm in scrubs or in the clinic versus when I'm walking around in a suit with a bunch of suits in my executive role, right? I mean, they will share things about how reality is in the OR or in the trauma bay that they would never say in the boardroom if they got invited to talk to leadership.
Leon, and it goes and extends beyond that too. Classically, and doctors are guilty of this. When we go to the legislators, when I've gone to Washington D.C., when I was uh, chairman of the AMA or president of the AMA. If I wear my white coat into the Capitol, I get a different response than if I wear a business suit. In my state legislature here, we have the University Day when we go over there, and so the dean of the law school is wearing a suit. The various other deans are wearing sport coats and ties. I wear my white coat when I go over there. There's 17 schools here on our campus, but it's on one medical school.
Yeah.
So I've got the white coat, and there's probably a little bit of envy that I get to wear a white coat. And
you earned it. You absolutely earned it.
Yeah, it's a white coat. And my lawyer colleague, who's a good friend of mine, he says, I see you're in uniform. I said, he said, you know what I'm talking.
That's right.
And you're right. That white coat speaks volumes. All physicians are leaders. All physicians lead. I read that somewhere.
Appreciate the shout out.
But I'm telling you, and if there's no place where it's more evident than in the lawmaking room. And when you get there and you sit at the table when you're testifying or you're giving a directive or you're explaining something, when you got the white coat, they almost automatically call you a doctor.
Yeah.
You might not even be a doctor. You could be a white coat from a nurse anesthetist or from a laboratory tech. But they assume you're a doc when you got that white coat.
Yeah, it carries, a bit of authority with it for sure. And, it's part of the emphasis in the book and the work that I'm trying to do here, that being explicit with our medical students and residents that this is how others see you means that in addition to your clinical obligation, you have a role model obligation, a communication obligation, an ethical obligation to uphold that mantle that you have voluntarily taken, that others have bestowed upon you. You're representing, centuries of respect and authority by putting that on. Very, very similar to what we experienced in uniform. You wear that uniform.
Yes, sir.
In the military down the street, you represent everybody who has ever served and ever will serve, and your actions, as you mentioned earlier, the camera's always rolling, the mic is always on.
Yes, and I do that, Leon, and that's kind of the role of a leader and a role of a physician educator. I hope I'm bringing the perspective to this medical school and any medical school that I might be called upon to serve in. Not only am I telling them how to be a doc, not only am I teaching them how to listen to heart sounds, how to examine thyroids, how to check for reflexes, and I do all of that. I like sharing those experiences. I did that last week when I showed some medical students how to check for reflex, especially an ankle reflex. I gave some little tricks. They said, I never figured that out. No one ever figured that out.
See,
It's not in the book.
that experience. Right?
You understand that experience. But I'm also telling them, and I'm teaching them from day one, how to be a leader, because whether they are reluctant leaders or not, whether they realize it or not, they are leaders. They are role models. They are mentors. They're not going to go lead a battalion. They're not going to lead a company. They're not going to lead a medical school unless they really want to, I guess, unless the plan allows them to do that. And they may never be other than a very, very good pediatrician or a very good radiologist. And that's plenty to be what they are. That's an exceptional career. You and I know that.
Yeah.
But they still have to understand that they have to learn that they are leaders, and their opinion and their actions guide and impact others indirectly as well as directly. And I think that's kind of our charge and my charge here, that I hope I'm serving well. That's what I'll.
That's a great summary. It leads into the last point here. I know you're never going to retire, but if you were to retire, what would you want people to look back on and say, Dean Harmon, Dr. Harmon, Professor Harmon did this for us, patients, nation, medicine?
You know what I'd say, and you know, you talked about, that this is for centuries. It's been this way. It's what Hippocrates called medicine is the greatest, most distinguished of all the arts. I quote Hippocrates a lot in there. What I'd like them to say about myself and about any good physician leader was they made a difference.
Yeah.
They made a difference. And nothing, they didn't build a new bridge. They didn't build a new medical school. They didn't cure cancer. They weren't a saint. But he chose to make a difference. They chose to make a difference. She chose to make a difference. And that's something we ought to all aspire to and be very proud of if we made a difference.
Yeah, you can do that many times a day, every day. It's a wonderful, wonderful career, wonderful opportunity. Dr. Harmon, has been terrific chatting with you. I'm sure our listeners over the years are going to look back on this and learn a ton. Thanks for everything you've done and continue to do, and appreciate you being on the All Physicians Lead podcast.
Leon, it's my honor to be asked, my privilege to be able to participate. And this too is one of my memorable events in my career. Thank you for allowing me to experience this.
This has been All Physicians Lead. We can all be better leaders, and our teammates and patients will be the beneficiaries. Go to allphysicianslead.com to unlock your potential, sharpen your impact, and elevate your journey. All Physicians Lead with Dr. Leon Morse is a production of Forbes Books.